significant funding gap, but there. That's okay.
Just shut off on me.
But there is funding in place to get the site ready. Basically, our understanding is that in terms of closing that gap to actually construct the project, it's dependent on really on NYSERDA, and so NYSERDA earlier this year put out a new solicitation for new projects, and basically it kind of hinges on the outcome of that solicitation. It was supposed to be announced in the spring, then we heard the summer, then end of September, and now the latest we're hearing is end of the year. So it's kind of, that part of it's really on hold until we know kind of NYSERDA's decision, because depending on which bid they go with for the next phase, it could kind of mean additional business for this project and could help make the financials work there. So so that's the big piece that everybody's waiting on, and nothing is really moving forward on anything in offshore wind related until NYSERDA's decision is made at the end of this year. So that's kind of where
these are sort
where
of
it stands.
Normal anticipated delays as opposed to potential undermining of the whole project.
Well, I mean, the funding gap is real. I mean, it's several $100 million cost difference, right? Mm-hmm. So I think everybody's hopeful that the NYSERDA decision kind of goes the way that we would need it to go to cover that, but we still don't know yet. So that's why really the focus is getting all of the site work, everything done there, so that once that decision's made, it can kind of move forward with the building construction.
Is there a date that we need an extension? That they need an extension? Wasn't it a 2-year window? 2-year construction?
I'd have to look at the documents at the top of my head. I think it was 2 years.
Yeah.
I don't know if Joe remembers off the top of his head.
No, I don't remember.
Yeah.
But they'll need an extension once that, I don't know how that works mechanically.
Well, if it does expire, then yes, you would need an extension.
What typically happens is the applicant will come back to you and ask for an extension, do a letter, an explanation. That's what we see with other IDAs that have, baked in completion dates and start dates, etc.
Don't we have 2 years in December?
I'll have to look at it. You
I
could be
remember
right.
what it is,
I mean, you've been keeping track of it for 2 years, so.
There is a 2-year deadline under which a project must begin construction, which has clearly been met. And we will get more information about whether or not there's a completion timeline in our documents as well.
Well, I mean, I think to Dick's point, they need the sales tax letter to purchase, and if they're not there yet, we probably would have to extend it. So.
It's not a big deal. I just.
Yeah.
Just because I'm.
Yeah. And as a reminder to some of the new members who weren't here when we approved this project, and then our audience, the financial benefits package to the Port of Albany is limited financially to the sales tax exemption on construction materials. They did not ask for a pilot or mortgage recording tax, so there's only that one kind of benefit that we would be looking to remove. With regard to offshore wind, though, Dave, you make a good point, and John, we sponsored you to go down to the big offshore wind conference in the spring. What's your sense of how other projects around the nation, or really globally, are being affected right now?
Yeah, right. So I think that's a good point. I mean, it's not just this project. It's every project in the offshore wind space is facing the same cost overruns. I think last month or over the summer, that a lot of them have petitioned NYSERDA for increased rates because of the cost overruns, right? So all the developers in these projects are looking at the financials right now, and I think getting a bit concerned that they need higher rates to make it work. So it's it's a challenge right now. It's not just it's not anything unique to the Port of Albany project. It's happening on really every project around the country and globally right now. I mean, we've seen the same thing in Europe too. So it's it's part of the challenge of, of a new industry, right? It's, there's some growing pains there, so.
But there's no evidence that other projects are potentially jeopardized or will not go forward. Yeah, that's something we could anticipate or.
No, I mean, it's tough to say. I mean, pretty much across the board, all of these types of projects in, North America, in Europe are all facing funding challenges right now. So like, so it's, it's.
I think you're seeing that in states where the state really stepped up and put a ton of money into it, which New York isn't, putting more money than they've already committed. I don't want to say they're not putting any money on the table, but so there have been states that have backed out and said, listen, we can't put any more money in. And so those projects are no longer happening. In other states where the state was like, no, this is our priority, and so they put additional money in, those are the only projects right now that are really moving forward. And so that certainly at the court level, we've been advocating to both the state and federal government to make sure that they really understand that impact. And right, the ball really is at this point in NYSERDA's, and the governor's really, there wasn't any money in the 2023 budget for offshore wind. And so the case continues to be made by, Albany, Freeman's, and the other projects down that without additional state funding, nationally projects aren't happening.
And this project is still unique because it's manufacturing the turbines, which globally are generally manufactured in Europe or Scandinavia. And as I understand it, this is the first manufacturing project intended in the United States.
Right. For the towers.
Yeah.
For the towers, so it's still unique. Some of the disruptions and project delays are associated with the rates, the cost of the electricity that partially goes back to compensate the operators of the farms. But we're still unique.
It's too
Yeah,
bad.
so-
Electricity is too cheap.
You have such words of wisdom.
It's a shame. What about Brook Crane? That's next.
Yeah. I'm gonna roll that
Yeah,
into
yeah,
that.
why don't you do
All
that
right,
one,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then I have two I'm gonna do.
Yeah, so Burt Crane, so the building's all done. Building department is basically ready to issue the CO's certificate of occupancy. There's just some remaining stormwater issues to be worked out, so engineering is working with them on that. But otherwise, it's done. I mean, it's ready to go. As you know, Burt Crane will be utilizing probably about 2/3 of the building there, and then leasing out the remaining portion. Yeah, that's moving right ahead, and should be ready to go soon.
It's excellent.
Yeah.
Good.
So
It looks great. I was down there a month ago, and it's a great location. You're right at the exit there, and then and they are looking to further develop that property. So
any timeline for when they would move in?
I don't have the time on them when they will be in, but I mean, as I said, the building is done. So.
Do we ever do tombstones or anything? Congratulations, or, Brook Crane from the IDA. Just,
A tombstone?
It's a
Yeah,
loose
you can actually explain what
cube.
that is.
What?
I mean, I know what it is, but.
Joe knows.
It's up in the paper.
You don't see them anymore.
Yeah, no, like,
Yeah.
I have
people
a
don't read the
collection.
newspaper. Or,
I must be young, I don't know that.
I'm sorry, I'm the geriatric old man. So. But
It's irrelevant.
no, I
No,
mean,
Ted knew, so, yeah.
right.
I think we can just
Deal bling. Right?
we can blow our own horn. I mean, congratulate the completion of a project.
Well, we could put something on the
Oh, absolutely.
website.
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah.
Once
Social
they're,
media,
once
maybe.
they're,
Yeah.
Social media?
Well,
no, I mean, I think once they're
What's their-
once they're in, I think, definitely, and I don't, certainly with the chamber too. I mean, do a
Yeah.
ribbon cutting and, have the IDA there. We should definitely do that. Yeah.
At the Huck Finn's, I'll never forget it, when they moved Hoffman's, there's a giant sign on the popcorn thing. It says Albany County IDA, so it's permanent. Like, there's a huge sign there that they did that project, so,
It's nice to have a completed project.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I proudly have my physical lucite tombstones from
Thank you, you
investment
know what
banking deals.
tombstones are.
I did, and every once in a while
At my age, I don't want to know about tombstones.
You'll never see yours.
I'll be in a jar. I'll be in a jar.
Okay,
Get a month off to work on those routines.
yeah, and you'd think that would get you off the board, but you'd be wrong.
Zoe, they're
We can
not
bring your
usually
own
this
in.
funny, so,
No, Dick is not usually this fun.
all right.
What's the address for Burt Crane for those of us who weren't?
It's 1381 River Road.
Okay,
So
cool.
it's right at the exit 22.
On the south side.
Yeah,
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, it's south.
I
of
just-
the exit.
My point is, we should be proud that we have completed the project. That's-
we should, absolutely.
It's great marketing.
All right, so I have two I need to discuss projects. The first is, as you know, the last meeting, we were talking about the West Yard Road project. Victoria, Dick, and I met with the applicant again for some additional information. And after that meeting, I think because Dick had asked for some very specific things, they've decided to hit pause on the project. I think because they did not want to necessarily be in a position to provide a guarantee or to go through due diligence on the LLC. So I did reach out to Deborah Lambeck, to see what the real reason, was. And that pretty much, gave them pause. Plus, I think they'd like to firm up a tenant as well. So I don't know whether that project is dead or it's really just on pause. But I think it's important that at least a little bit today, maybe Dick, if you want to mention what you had asked for, and then also have a discussion of whether we should even be asking for that. And I know Joe's here today too, so I'm sure he has some thoughts on that as well. But do you want to?
Sure, I think in some substance, I suggested and we asked for information on the principals, okay, personal financial information. This stems from the monolith transaction where we had a clawback which was non-collectible. If the print, it's my feeling, and I'm only one person, that if you want to do a project and you're making representations, you should be willing to back up the representations. So we asked for guarantees on clawback. And those are really the key things, information on the principals, because they have I really personally don't want to approve a transaction. We don't know who the underlying people are that are applying. And there's some mystical, there's a person involved with this that owns a substantial amount that.
An investor, yeah.
Well, an investor.
Yeah.
So that's really what was asked. And do others believe that we should be requesting information on the principals that are applying for IDA, and whether or not, if they're making representations, they should be willing to step forward and guarantee those representations.
Now, before we ask for any other comments or questions that people might have this morning, since most of you are really quite new to the board, which is terrific in some ways, there's a little bit of history because I've been on the board for going on 13 years now. And I was on the board during the monolith transaction. So what I do want to talk about for just a minute is some of the history of how we've made these decisions in the past. This IDA almost always sees projects that are, let's say, 75% bank funded. So what we typically have is a commercial bank acting as a partner and underwriter. And we take a mortgage and we are partially secured. Kate could explain it better, by the fact that there's the mortgage. And so the actual financial commitment of the project owner is maybe 25%. And that's quite common with IDAs. With LLCs, we do our due diligence by finding out who they are, who the owners are. We ask for information about, conflicts and things like that, and that's all in the application. We have not ever before asked to look through the LLC and conduct any kind of due diligence or investigation on the owners of the LLC. We have worked with LLCs before, particularly in Vista and elsewhere in town. I think probably most of our projects are LLCs. Is a very common real estate vehicle. And we haven't asked for that. I don't actually know of any IDAs who ask, except in truly extraordinary circumstances, to go through that LLC as part of our due diligence. So we have also engaged in transactions on what I would call spec buildings in Vista, where we approved benefits through the developer prior to knowing that the actual facility had been leased to a bona fide tenant. And I think we finally dropped the report on one of the Vista properties because we'd awarded benefits. They couldn't find a tenant and they simply never built it. Their exposure was the value of the land. Our exposure was zero because they drew down absolutely none of the financial assistance. So that's actually also a backstop that we have. Getting to Monolith, they drew down, I believe, only a portion of the sales tax exemption on construction materials. We had an extended period of time. They came to us, rush. New York State ESD was involved, actually had a big tent event. And we were asked to rush. They had difficulty getting their financing in place. So they did have to come back for reapproval. When they had the financing in place, we did approve it. We did conduct an unusual amount of due diligence on SAE Sun, the owner of Monolith. We designated one board member who had extensive commercial banking experience to review financials. They requested, and the board agreed, that to protect confidentiality, we would delegate that one member to review the financials. And he said the financials of the existing company are very strong, and they probably were at that moment. So as things unwound, the IDA's financial exposure was chiefly having to pay counsel fees to get in line among the other creditors. But they hadn't drawn down any pilot. They probably had some mortgage recording tax exemption. We haven't actually done an exemption. And then the portion of the sales tax on construction materials, and you can see the construction materials are still there. And I mention this because we don't have a policy for due diligence. The kinds of things that Dick is looking for here are very unusual for us. And I'm going to finish and then we're going to open it up because we've got a lot of members here. And we don't have to make any kind of decision right now. This is on hold. We have some time to think about it. I urge everyone to go back to our UTEP and go through the clawback provision, talk to Kate about the nature of the security that we do have through the mortgage, how the clawback works, and really think about this conceptually. I did some research. I looked at the authority's budget office. I looked at New York State Economic Development Council. I looked for information from a couple of law firms on, is there guidance for the financial due diligence that an IDA should perform when evaluating awarding financial assistance. And it comes down to a short paragraph published in the Hodgson Russ Public Authorities Guidebook from 2014. And the phrase that stuck in my mind was readily available.
Yeah, I just, this is a spec where a syndicator, okay, down and acquire fees up front. Okay, so they get their money. Ask the question, do you get fees up front for the private placement of equity? Okay, and just, I know the business, okay, and they didn't want to show the private placement memorandum because they don't want us to know what they're pulling out, but then they don't want to guarantee.
Right.
Okay, so I think I've said enough.
It is important to remember that everything they submit to us, except for a very narrow exception, becomes public. So, we're always mindful of that. But Joe, have you heard of any more recent guidance that the members should hear about fiscal due diligence?
No, but what I've seen with our other clients is, some concerns that, that Dick has been raising. But the tension is, relying on the financial professionals that are doing their due diligence in connection with the lending, as you point out, the commercial banks, the investment banking firms, and how involved the IDA gets in that process. What we try to do is, if a client comes to us with a problem, we try to address the problem. I mean, we talked a little bit, monolith has been raised. It was an unsecured obligation with clawback. Is that something that the IDA wants to address through a mortgage? The issue there, though, is that going to impact the ability of the company, the project applicant, to get financing? What we typically see is a pilot mortgage. And a pilot mortgage secures the obligation to make the pilot payments. And there's generally no resistance on the part of the company, or little resistance on the part of the company. And typically, maybe you need to do some explanation, but no resistance on the part of the lender, because the lender recognizes after the discussion that the pilot mortgage simply puts the IDA in the same position that the company would be with respect to real property taxes. Because if the company was doing the project on its own, real property taxes, if they fail to make the real property taxes or real property tax payments, there'd be a municipal lien, a tax lien on the property, and that would be ahead of the bank mortgage automatically. So the pilot mortgage is a nice compromise, if you will, in terms of protecting you with respect to for unpaid pilot payments. Our experience generally is that you don't typically have a lot of failed projects. So we may be talking about the 1%, 2%, 3% situation. What we've done in situations where there's been an unsecured obligation and a clawback payment due, and the company is in default and doesn't have any money to make the payment, is you then have a decision of, well, are we going to litigate this and incur those costs? And this IDA made that decision with respect to monolith. There was a extensive discussion on that and a resolution about not to go forward because there wasn't a significant return, but they went through a deliberative process for considering all that. So the tension is, and you're seeing it with this project applicant, is they're coming to the IDA for benefits. They recognize that they're getting public funds and there should be some strings to those public funds. But the $64,000 question is, how many strings do you put on those benefits? And where do you fit in the bell curve of IDAs in terms of how they're looking at people?
Thank you.
One thing too, on the monolith project, every year we have to file an ST-62 with the state about any sales tax benefits and if there was any episodes of recapture. We filed that, in fact, with the monolith year, there was the issue, and we provided all the documentation on the steps that we took. And the second, we did that the next year too. They were fine. You know, they accepted it and just said, you know, we obviously do our diligence at the end of the project. We didn't just walk away and say, oh, well, it went bad. And, you know, that was the thickest, it was like that thick of an envelope to file a one-page form.
Yeah. Whereas now we have some of the LLCs that were done when I first came on the board are actually, their pilots are going to be finishing up, and they've been performing.
And most of this ends this year, doesn't it?
You know, Al, you sent it,
A
and you
couple
sent
do,
the.
I think a couple.
And I look at them every year, and then like,
Yeah.
a week later, I forget them. But I think a lot of them are aging off.
Yeah, we didn't used to charge an annual fee. I had come to a board meeting when I was applying for membership where the board made the decision to impose an annual fee. And then I was appointed and joined the board shortly thereafter.
And I don't want to speak for you, but I've heard you say this before too. I think that there needs to be more discussion because we probably rather see a policy, right?
Yeah.
Than a
Be
one-off,
consistent across the board,
you
yeah.
know, like we're gonna do this here and not there. So I think that's what we're kind of trying to start today. My hope is that the applicant comes back. You know, I think they're trying to firm up, I think the tenant is a big thing as well because, but it's kind of hard when you're not built to get a tenant. So they're kind of, you know, in that limbo. But I think it's important that we decide what it is that we're going to expect with a job or a project like this.
My thought on this is, you know, obviously there's a disappointment with the delay in that particular project, but, you know, you look at this as an opportunity to flesh out Dick's issues. So I would do whatever every good board does is refer it to committee and have them look at it. And candidly, I can't, you know, the monolith project is in the dark recesses of my mind. I mean, what was the actual outlay there in terms of what the company walked away with without the clawback? I can't remember the actual number. But we can walk through that process, and we can also look at what other IDAs are doing. And we can also kind of clearly outline to the new board members and to the existing board members what the process is with respect to when a default takes place and what are the upside and downside, what's the risk, what's the return, you know, how secure are you here, what's the likelihood of getting the money back. You know, IDAs in general have progressed significantly over the years in terms of administration and operation. I mean, I remember getting calls from IDA clients 15 years ago saying, you know, we think this company hasn't made their pilot payments for the last 6 years. What do we do? And I go, well, oh my God. So you didn't get a call from the town? No, we didn't get a call from the town either. So that just doesn't happen anymore. But I think this is an opportunity to look at it.
I mean, I'd be interested, I know where Dick is coming from too. I mean, as attorneys, even when we do deals, we do our due diligence, right? So it's just how deep are you going to go with this into those LLCs, into the investors? And, you know, I think from a business perspective, you know, that's where they're coming from. You know, we're going to, you know, you're going to require all these things and, you know, so there's both sides here, but I really think, and I could sense it from John, like, we do want this project. I mean, you know, and so hopefully, you know, we can work out all of that, but it's really important that we get some direction from the board as to, you know, which way, even if we, you know, put it back into a committee, what, you know, you're all thinking. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that you want to share.
No, very good.
I mean, one of the questions I've got is, so the differentiator with this one was that there weren't banks or a mortgage involved. This was an investor. Is that a key part of the difference, that we weren't?
Yes.
It's 75% bank, 75% bank.
This is 75%.
For construction or for permanent?
Both.
Yeah.
The differentiation in my mind was that this was a developer syndicator-led project looking for a tenant where they would be getting fees up front. Okay? Yeah, I'd be personally, if they said, we'll subordinate our fees to construction completion, yeah, that would be satisfactory, but we don't know what those fees were.
Right.
I think, I don't know necessarily where I land, but I think it's really important that we are consistent across the board, that we're not changing it for one versus the other. Or we need to be clear, if this, then that, if this, then that. But it needs to be very clearly laid out, and it needs to be carried out in that manner. So I think policy is fantastic. I mean, I'd be happy to sit on, if there's a committee, I'd be happy to do that. But consistency to me is, if you're not consistent, that's where the board gets into trouble, right?
Yeah, well, it was pointed, you know, out to me, and rightfully so, that, you know, there was several projects, Vista was some of the examples where they're very similar, and we did not ask for that information. So, but that being said, I don't know that there was the investor model, the syndication model with those, right,
We didn't
Joan?
ask.
Yeah, oh, we didn't ask, we
No.
didn't even know?
We
Okay.
have, well, you know, we always, the information about the project ownership and management that we collect is in the application, and all of those applications still exist. But the questions didn't come up about trying to look through and say, is this a syndication model? How is the investor getting paid? We didn't ask those questions at the time. So one of the things on my mind, as you can tell, and Georgette, you put that really well, is questions like this typically for us come up when we have a project. But we all do need to think about, are we changing gears in the middle of a project? And is that the right thing to do? So this is something important to think about. We don't have to make any decisions today.
Was just for clarification, was the issue who the investors are, or actually their financial stability, the background?
I think both. Both.
So they balked at telling you who the investors in the LLC were?
They give us a name. I don't know, I defer to Kate about that.
Yeah, I don't think,
I mean, what's,
I think,
Or
yeah,
Just
I
the
mean,
primary investor, but all, I mean, what,
I think it was an investor. I mean, I think it's a family,
out
I
of
think
New
it was
York
like a
City.
family office, yeah.
The structure of the LLC, the two gentlemen who we met, they each have 25% of the LLC. This is what they told us at the time. And 50% of the LLC was owned by someone, we had the name, but
Right.
no background. And altogether, and this is in the application, they are only 25% of the capital, and the other 75% of the capital is intended to come from a commercial bank, which will do the full underwriting.
And I'm sorry, just so I'm on the same page, they were willing to give you the names of the investors, or?
Yep.
Okay. So again, going back to my approach of what is the problem that you're trying to address, one of the issues that I'm always worried about with a project applicant is that, you accept the application and you move forward a couple of months, you schedule a public hearing, and then someone Googles that name and they say, oh my God, you know that you're dealing with a front for, a money laundering operation. Well, I mean, a number of our IDAs do background checks. So that would seem to certainly address that issue without, and because they're giving you the name, that would and they're comfortable giving you the name, that addresses that issue. I guess the next question is, in order to, what's the rationale for getting the financial information with respect to the investor? And what issue are you trying to address with respect to that situation or that question? And I'm not sure what that issue is, Dick.
But that's what the bank would be doing as part of the mortgage.
That's my, and
Well, the bank may never see the investor.
Excuse me?
The bank may never look through to the investor. Oftentimes, the investor may not necessarily be looked at by the bank.
So what due diligence does the bank do to authorize a mortgage?
I don't know, financial.
I mean, the bank may take the position. I'm not, Dick knows this business. I don't know this business. My view on this is if the investor, for instance, has weak financials and the project fails, then we have a situation where, well, we put the property back on the tax rolls and we go after for the clawback for whatever the benefit is, and and we're done. But it's difficult. I mean, if we got the, and this is far-ranging conversation, obviously, but if we got the financials, are we, and it's like the Spider-Man movie, comes great power, comes great responsibility. If we get the financials, are we confident enough to look at the financials and make a decision if the financials make sense? So that's the other issue, because and you've seen it in your prior life. You ask for this stuff, you better know what to do with it when you get it, So that's all part of this discussion, I think.
Well, don't we have an AOB responsibility for financial due diligence?
No,
But that's
it's not public.
That's the point that that Victoria's making. There really isn't a hard, fast rule as to what the IDA is supposed to do by way of financial review. And speaking historically, kind of jumping on the same point that the chair made, is that most IDAs do rely on the financial due diligence done by the commercial banks and or the investment bankers.
Who have a far greater exposure financially than we do, and reputationally. The monolith situation created serious losses for a commercial bank. They were very exposed, whereas ours were much smaller. One of the things that the bank will look at, I'm sure, is the value and potential value of the site, and the nature of the business that the applicant intends to have present on the site. And John and I have been working, well, John has been listening to me talk to him about this, on the financial due diligence on the project. And also, he'll be doing an economic impact of the project. And as some of the information that goes into the pro forma analysis doesn't need the assistance, is it a going concern with or without? Going concern is a term of art, so that's probably not the right word. I did some research on the commercial real estate market in this region using the CoStar database, which is what the real estate professionals are using. And industrial space in especially Albany County is rapidly being taken up by something. And space that could be industrial is often being preserved for non-industrial uses. We see that in the farm. And I'm no problem with green space, but that's another example. Large lots within Albany County in this region are decreasing in number. So there's a lot of demand for the kind of land that is down by the Selkirk rail yards. And vacancy rates in either industrial or warehouse/flex, the vacancy rates are below 5%. And within the region, they're even lower down in this southwest portion of Albany County. We're able to look down there. So there is demand for this space, confirmed by a third-party objective data provider. And we know we get periodic requests from the Albany County Alliance, John. They send out like requests for information about parcels. How many of those do we actually have a lot big enough for, or a parcel big enough?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the few.
Well, I guess and I know I've opened a can of worms, but they're on pause right now. So if they come back, in the meantime, I think we need to, convene and think this through. But there is one more potential project that I wanted to mention if you're amenable to moving on to
I just
that.
have one very
Sure.
quick question. It's more of a theoretical.
Mhm.
The project is on hold. Does that mean from your perspective,
No, their application's on hold.
well, okay, the application.
Yeah, the
So,
project's been on hold.
okay, so from your perspective, that is still a marketable property and you would be actively pursuing other potential projects for that same site? Or are we now on pausing on that
No,
until
no.
this gets resolved?
No. The only thing that's paused is, to Kate's point, is their application before the IDA. They're still before the planning board for site plan review. The ball's in their court on that for next steps. So they're moving forward there, and they still don't have a tenant. So either way, as we get prospective inquiries, we're still directing it.
They closed on the property? I think they closed, didn't they? They were going to, did they? They said they were going to.
I thought they were all gonna close everything at the same time.
Yeah.
That's why they were trying to coordinate with us.
After site plan approval,
Yeah.
is when they would. They'll basically. I think they said they would close within a matter of weeks. After site plan approval, but that hasn't been yet.
Are they going forward with the planning board?
Yeah.
Great. If they can do it without us, great.
Yeah.
We still have
Well,
the
they
project.
say that they can.
They sat there and they told us they can't. If
Right.
they can, then they're.
Yeah,
And-
but just keep in mind, those are two separate
They could
processes.
turn
So,
around and sell it.
you can still go through
Sure,
site plan approval, but still need IDA support. It's
sure, yeah, so they'll come
right,
back.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
great, great discussion.
Mhm.
Yep, and I'll reiterate, part of the due diligence at the project level that we're now going to be doing for every project is applying the if not for test.
Right.
Can they go
Right.
forward, which is why we've asked for
Mhm.
10, 12 years of pro forma financials for the project so that we will be able to hang our hat on something.
But just for my own clarity.
Yeah.
Because the project is moving forward with the planning board,
Mhm.
is it now considered sort of off the market for other potential developers? Or would you still, if someone came in today and said, I want to do something down at the rail yards and I know you got the land, would you?
Well, they're in
basically-
contract to purchase.
They're in
it,
contract,
So it's
yeah,
tied up.
yeah,
It's
So
tied
that
up.
puts a hole.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, it's their project, but certainly, as I said, they're still looking for tenants, right? So from the ultimate tenant perspective, as we have inquiries of companies looking for space, this is a very marketable project. And to their point, I think they would rather have a tenant sooner rather than later as well.
Yeah. So they're still under contract to buy the property.
Yes.
And their project,
And they're moving forward with the town planning board.
Right.
So, yeah.
and their projections are gonna be based on rent received from third parties, not revenue generated from internal operations. It's a little
Right.
different, a little different.
Right. Yeah, they're collecting the lease payment.
Mhm.
The lease payment there. Yeah.
And that's not unusual.
Before we move on though, I feel like where did we land? We had a lot of discussion, but what is the action on this?
I'm not sure we need any, do we?
I think we need a consistent policy.
Can we refer to governance
Sure.
committee,
Finance committee.
finance? Oh, then-
Okay, finance is working on the budget.
That's
What-
in finance committee.
I'm willing to form have formed, what are we allowed to do? An ad hoc committee to go through these issues, balancing that risk, understanding what's our exposure for any given project, how does it change depending on the nature of the applicant? If we want it to change, what kind of security structures are other IDAs using? We certainly want to think about, the broader range of communities that projects can site in.
So who would like to engage on that, and I will follow up and
Yeah,
call
I'm
you.
happy with that.
Okay,
Sure.
okay. And you? What about you two?
Do you want me on it?
No,
I
no,
think we know where he stands.
We're recording, so I declined to answer that.
I was about to say that, I have greater opportunities to speak at the moment, and I would really appreciate members taking the initiative and looking into it with an open mind. So I don't need
think
to be
it's
on
important.
that.
It's important for us to strengthen and confirm where we stand and what our process is. So I mean, either way, it's a good, especially since there's so many of us that are newer. Yeah, it's a good, yeah, it's a good.
I do think you should be on it.
What? What'd you say?
I do think you should be on
I second that.
it.
I'm happy to be on it.
All right.
No, I just,
All right.
I'm, any committee I can be on.
We're meeting after 9 a.m.
Agreed.
They're
Okay,
Say-
okay.
say yes.
Wait. Okay, Mr. Chair.
Just so you know.
Yeah,
You're the
I don't
representative.
I don't need to be on that.
Okay.
Four members is
Yeah, I heard Georgette say yes.
Well done.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Just
I'm kidding too.
school.
All right.
stuff.
So I will reach out to Chris, Georgette, Dick Cutlow, and Ted and try to put something together.
Okay.
All right, after 9 a.m.
Right on.
All right. The last thing, Joe and I spoke yesterday. I'll let Joe talk about PSEG and having talked to Matt Moses, so maybe what they're thinking, or do you think that's I'm looking at your face, it might be
Yeah, I think
premature.
That might be premature.
Okay.
I think, what I think you should say is that we got an inquiry from them about a potential new project. And, you're definitely gonna follow up with them.
Yeah. Their pilot is up, I think, the end of this year.
Yeah.
And I sent an additional notice, just making sure that the school district and everyone knew about that and copied them. So I think it probably prompted them to say, So I'm going to reach out to them and see what exactly it is that they're going to propose, but potentially some of the same thing but also new part of the project as well, from what we understand.
I mean, it's been a tremendous project.
Yeah.
Of all the things that we're
Well, in
working
the
on.
discussion about revenue, that's why I said, if that's something that happens next year, potentially could be multi-million-dollar projects.
Drive around this area, there aren't many places that have 4 big stacks that make power.
Yeah,
That's a pretty impressive place down there.
all right, well, that's it for projects. I think that's enough right now. So let's go to discussion of the New York Forward action items.
Yes, that's new business, item A. John, why don't you take the floor and then we'll look at the letter?
Sure. Yeah. So New York Forward, we applied for this last year. Last year was the first time that this program existed. Applying for it again, asking for a letter of support from the IDA for our application again this year. Basically, this is focused on Delaware Avenue. It would be a grant it's a competitive grant, and 2 to 3 communities in the capital region would receive one, basically to fund kind of capital improvements throughout the corridor, but really kind of outside of the roadway. So it could fund, private development and redevelopment, facade improvements, kind of branding and marketing, throughout the corridor. So new streetscape improvements, connections to the rail trail, right? But just basically investing in the Delaware Avenue corridor, kind of physical infrastructure there. So again, we could receive 2 to 3 communities in the capital region would receive an award anywhere from $2.25 million to $4.5 million. Our application includes, I think, 10 projects. So again, a mix of private development projects, includes redevelopment at 333 Delaware up the street here, some housing conversion at Main Square, potentially taking some of the second floor units and converting that to housing. So projects like that. I think we didn't get it last year, but I think we've got a good foundation on the application. I think have a good chance at it this year. So we're going for it again.
And last year, because of the timing of the grant, we pulled the board informally, and you all said, yes, go ahead, Madam Chair. Not all of you call me Madam Chair. Sign that letter. This year, we have the opportunity for a board discussion and a more formal resolution in support, if that's what the board would like to do.
Does the application spell out the specific project?
It does,
And,
yes.
and the dollar value
Yes.
associated with all?
Right. Yeah. So right. So we basically group it into 10 projects. We've got 5 kind of private sector projects, right? So that's redevelopment of specific buildings, and then 5 more public space projects. So we have a couple of proposing a few new kind of parks along the corridor. So working with like Del Mar Reformed Church, Community Bank, using portions of their property to create some public space. And yes, it does specify. So for the public projects, we'd be looking at using grant funds basically for 100% of the project. For the private projects, New York Forward funds would contribute up to 20% of the project cost. So they'd still be, utilizing bank financing, their own equity, but this would help, cover the gaps. And basically, our case to the state is, many of the projects that that we included last year are in this year's, right? They haven't gotten off the ground yet because they need this support to make the financials work. So, but yes, up to 20% for private projects.
So the applicant says, whatever it is, 333 Delaware Avenue, the project would be converting the building.
Exactly. Yeah. So in the application, we have a full page for each project that spells out exactly what they're looking to do, and the amount requested from the New York.
You said the grant application anywhere from 250,000 to.
The total grant would be anywhere from $2.25 million to $4.5 million for the whole, again, for the whole quarter, and then that would be split across these
10 projects.
right.
Our support is only upside, there's no downside.
No.
Yeah.
But just saying, it's a fine.
Yeah, just to understand. Yeah.
Right, it's a fine letter, but it didn't have the specificity that obviously it's clearly in the application.
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So they do have something to base their decision on.
Yes.
STC.
Yeah, do you have to go?
We have like 15 more minutes.
Okay, all right.
We have properties that are not utilized or underutilized. I mean, 333 Delaware is a great example.
Yeah.
That restaurant was great, but the restaurant interior is horrible.
Yeah.
So
Right.
would be great. So this is,
I can't
thanks for
imagine
writing a
past
letter.
inspection.
Yeah.
Good use of our support.
Do you want an official resolution?
Yeah, Kate, what form?
You can just,
Yeah.
do it on,
Right.
And my only question about the letter is there a way for the letter, which now has my name because it's the form from last year, to do a better job to reflect that the entire board is supporting this? Is there a language amendment that we could stick in there somewhere?
Sure.
How about Victoria Stores on behalf of the Bethlehem IDA
Yeah.
board?
Okay.
Which approved the letter at a meeting duly on September 27th.
With 100% attendance.
And you can even change the first sentence, Victoria. This letter is to express the full support of the IDA board for the town of Bethlehem.
Yes.
Okay.
That kind of thing.
We
Well,
say
it's our-
Yeah,
Oh,
but we did.
Full support of the town IDA.
We did too. I'm thinking about it.
I think you put R instead of the board. That's okay.
All right.
Yeah, we can fix it.
These are ministerial
Yeah.
changes.
No, otherwise it's fine.
can we, have a motion to,
I think Ted wants to move that.
So moved.
Yeah.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Thank you. The motion passes. We will submit a letter of support. I'll sign it on behalf of the board with the ministerial changes, wording changes to reflect that the entire board is supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you.
We already did number 2. So
Yeah, we
got
did.
committee assignments.
Committee assignments. So the Finance Committee is meeting on Friday at 8:30, and we have 7 members of the board. What I propose to do is expand the Finance Committee to 4 members, at least on an interim basis, and invite Chris Welch to serve on the Finance Committee and be there with us on Friday morning. So I'm asking for a motion to approve Chris's appointment to the Finance Committee.
So moved.
Did you agree to that?
I was kind of to it.
Okay. I'm assuming you agreed to it. You got this look on your face like, maybe.
All in favor?
Hi.
And Dick, if all this new project review that you're doing with the West Yards, if that takes up so much time, you can't serve on the governance committee, I'm okay with that.
You want me off the governance committee? It's
All
okay with me.
right, pause. So the motion passes to appoint Chris to the Finance Committee. Thank you all. But you make a good point. We were down 1 or 2 members for a long time, and a number of people have had to double up on committees. And so I invite everyone to look at your committee assignments. Look at the committee charters. They are in the big orange book of Bethlehem. And evaluate whether you feel that you are or still are on the right committees for the things that you want to give. If you want to make a change, I would want at least no later than the annual meeting at the end of February to give everyone an opportunity to change their committee assignments. Also, we have, Dick is doubling up on officer assignments. So in addition to the chair, we have a vice chair, a secretary, and a treasurer. And I would also ask everyone who has been serving, and I am grateful for the service of both of our officers. If more than one position is more responsibility than you want to have, I would say that we could certainly create an opportunity for officers to make changes as they wish as well. And again, I would be looking to have that all resolved at the annual meeting in February. So we have some months for people to think about it, to talk to people who've been on the committees or in the officer positions, and think about whether you want to change your form of service within the board.
So what I'm going to do is circulate a list of the committees and then ask you to respond if you want to stay on that or if you have other thoughts. So at least it's not, we walk away and then nothing happens.
That's right.
Okay.
And there's certainly time to think about it. It's September, but we only meet once a month. So I want everyone to have time. Okay, anything else under new business?
The only quick thing is, I'm assuming in October, we are gonna, at that meeting, approve a budget. And,
If we don't, we have problems with the authority budget.
well, right. So it's important that we have a quorum. So I just wanted to mention that we need at least 5, I'm sorry, 4, because now we have a full board, to carry that. So I just mentioned that's gonna be the big item probably for that.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, if anything comes back on West Yard Road, potentially that could be on the agenda as well.
And that date is October
26th, I think, is ringing a bell with me. When I 25th. Yep.
What the Finance Committee will do on Friday, our goal is to draft a budget for 2024 and then project it out a few years. And then the board would, the Finance Committee would then make a recommendation to the full board. The information will be available to you. But again, you are all invited to attend so that you have as much time as you wish. to be involved.
All right. Anything else?
Any other new business? All right, well, thank you all. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor of adjourning?
Uh,
Any opposed? Okay, this meeting is adjourned at 9:20 a.m. on September 23rd. Thank you all for everyone for discussing and being really actively involved today.
Thanks, Victoria.